In this video, I will not talk about the morality of AI. There's already so many people talking about that, nor will I talk about the legal side of things with copyright infringements and all the legal cases that come with it. Let's instead talk about creativity. To be precise, let's tackle the question of how AI art holds up against creative scrutiny and why our stance on the matter can tell us whether we suffer from intellectual atrophy. Hey, my name's June Chevalier and I'm an artist and author. I am not a professional if professional means someone who works for the big industry. I write music, I play music, I used to draw, now I sculpt 3D models and I write dark fantasy novels. I'm a freelancer and I've been doing it for over 4 years now, and so far I've published 2 novels. I don't know if that gives me some sort of credibility on this topic or not, but let's just go and see whether my arguments make sense. I'll talk about other people's take on AI later on in this video, but before that, I need to talk about the basic before diving into that topic. Firstly, I feel the need to clarify that I'm talking about generative AI here, mainly AI image generators. I am not talking about tools that actually helps people create art instead of replacing people who create art. Tools such as smart masking in Photoshop, for example, or retopology tools in 3D softwares, or denoisers, maybe some kind of physics simulations, or some 3D rendering softwares. I am talking about generative AI such as Midjourney and ChatGPT and Leonardo AI and Adobe Firefly. As a digital artist, I don't consider myself to be a Luddite. I don't hate technology. I consider digital as a medium, just as the traditional way of creating art is also a medium. But there's the keyword, creating. A prompter does not create art, in my opinion. Someone who types what kind of vibes he wants to see, in whose style, using which camera lens, under what lighting, they cannot be considered an artist. He is as much of an artist to me as Pope Julius II was to Michelangelo. And you could argue a prompter is a director, but a director is not an artist. Some people out there might argue that they keep having to reiterate their prompts and that proves a creative process. No, if Julius II kept reiterating his request, telling Michelangelo to change his color and add a figure or two in the paintings, it would still not make him an artist. He is still the commissioner. A director could be an artist, but a director and an artist are not the same. Vice versa, an artist could also be a director, but not all artist is a director. That's like saying a plumber could also be a husband. Not all husbands are plumbers. They are two different definitions of people. We can get into the nitty-gritty like, well, I am also an artist because I can draw a stick figure, but no, someone who runs every other week is not an athlete. We don't live in a world like that. A prompter is not an artist. Hell, he's not even a director. An actual director can get involved in the creative process, not just the brainstorming and outlining and then leaving the process into this black box of mystery, and he just waits for something to be spat out of this black box. That's not what a director does. A prompter types and waits. If the result doesn't come out good, he types again and wait again. There is no involvement in the creative process. Now that we've established that the prompter is not the artist, let's talk about AI art itself. So, does AI art look good? Yes, I'd be lying or disingenuous if I say AI art looks crap. I think AI art looks cool, well, some of them at least, and there is nothing wrong with creating art only for it to look cool. Oscar Wilde would say it's enough for art to just look cool with nothing else behind it. If Midjourney just wants to make something that look cool, then Midjourney is an artist. Alas, Midjourney is incapable of having an intent, thus nullifying its creations as an art form by the definition of aestheticism alone. And when it does not even qualify as an art form by aestheticism standard, there's no need to look further at AI images through the lens of expressionism or art as a form of expression, for example. We can also move on to look at it through the lens of art as a functional philosophy, because AI images cannot be seen as having the intent to explore the human experience, as there is no artist involved in the creative process, at least not one who has a soul anyway. So is it all doom and gloom for generative AI then? Well, there's one definition that may categorize AI images as an art form. Let's now talk about art as pleasure. Some people may take the hedonistic approach. They think that the primary function of art is to invoke pleasure in the audience, and by this definition, AI images can then be considered an art form because we can see that AI images look nice and they invoke pleasure in us, at least in some of us. And I'm not here to argue against this hedonistic theory. I am only saying that AI images can be seen as an art form by some people who subscribe to this theory, even though I would like to ask them personally, like, what's the difference between video games and watching a football match or eating good food, for example? All of them invoke pleasure, right? Why is then a video game is called art? Because it gives you pleasure, and then the others are not considered an art form, But that's a topic for another time. For now, let's just say that by this definition, generative AI is then qualified to be called an art form. Midjourney can be called an artist, and everything it generates can be considered as art. So the next question would be, is Midjourney a good artist? And can its works hold up under scrutiny? A lot of people in both anti-AI camp and pro-AI camp can spit out arguments about the creative process. The anti-AI sentiment argues that it takes time and effort to create art, thus putting itself on a higher ground compared to the simplicity of prompting. The pro-AI sentiment, on the other hand, argues that it takes a lot of trials and errors to get the perfect prompt to generate the images that they want, thus putting it on the same level of effort that it takes an artist to make an artwork. Therefore, it can be considered an artwork just as an oil painting is. Well, I personally think both arguments are weak. Art is not defined by how much effort you put into it. Someone who draws every day can probably draw Mickey Mouse in less than 10 minutes without much effort. It might not cost them blood and sweat, but it is still a drawing, an artwork. So, no matter how long a prompter takes to type and retype, whether it takes him 5 minutes or a year, it doesn't make him an artist. It's absurd to think that an image taking 1 year to prompt is thus more of an artwork than a 5-minute sketch. I'm sorry to say that I'm really not interested in that kind of discourse. I am more interested in getting to the bottom of things. Now, how would you define an artwork? So bear with me, because it will make sense at the end. Is a banana taped to a wall an artwork? We are lost in search of the meaning of art throughout the years that some people now consider a messy bed in a museum an artwork. So let me give you my answer. An artwork is an artist's mind manifested. Art is reality as perceived by the mind. In other words, it is a fantasy manifested through a medium. It is a render of an artist's mind. So without an artist, there is no art. If I take my cup of coffee and put it in a museum, it is not art, it is reality. So why is it not art? I mean, the cup might be considered a work of its artisan, but putting a cup of coffee down is not art because it has not been rendered or perceived through the mind first. But if I paint the cup of coffee, then painting is art because it is a reality that has been perceived by the mind first before being manifested through a medium. Let's take architecture for example. Is it art? Well, it depends. Architecture is an overlap between art and utility, and depending on the intent of the architect, it can veer more towards art or it can veer more towards function. An Art Nouveau building might lean more towards aesthetic, while modernist architecture, which rose to prominence post-World War II, might lean more towards utilitarian. But since it can still be considered an art form, it requires an artist. So to simplify my idea, we can consider an artist's mind as a portal through which reality can be reprojected or a concept can come into existence. This portal is shaped by the artist's experiences, reflections, and sensations. If we consider Stable Diffusion as an artist, then its experiences and sensations shape its artworks. But it does not have any of those, since it's not a sentient being, right? And it has no way of perceiving reality in the first place. But let's be very generous here. Let's say the data that it's being fed with are its experiences. Then Stable Diffusion can pass as an artist, right? Well, here's where it gets interesting. The human mind is more than just a repertoire of data. Even if Stable Diffusion can perceive the world as we do, it cannot come up with any semblance of feedback in the form of reflections or how it feels about the world. Data is processed differently in human. It varies from one mind to another, between different times, across different emotions, and that's how we get innovation. And there's your next keyword, innovation. Can generative AI innovate, or will it always be restricted with the data it's being trained on? Sure, it can create stunning visuals based on its data, its experiences, so to speak, but does it have the capability to innovate? I'd like to give an analogy for the gamers out there, because I'm a gamer myself. An AI can create games, for example. This AI then will be fed with data taken from other games, be it the code or the art, right? So if it has never been fed with a game, for example with a stamina system, then is it possible for the AI to come up with a stamina system? If the prompter then asks the AI to come up with a stamina system, it would just ignore it because it doesn't even know what stamina is, because it does not live in the real world and it does not experience what humans experience, and it has never been fed data that contain a stamina system in it. So in this regard, AI is very limited compared to actual artists. However, AI lovers shouldn't be sad. AI is a good employee. It does what you tell it to, and that is why corporations love AI. It is the ultimate dream of corporate greed. For you non-artists out there, I want to tell you something. The difference between artists and AI is that artists like to explore and innovate either through modifying other people's works, combining some people's works into something fresh, doing the opposite of other people's works maybe, or just looking at the world and having the intent to capture it or modify it as you feel it. AI, in contrast, is nothing more than a repertoire of data. When it modifies something, it does it because it is being told to. And even then, it cannot venture outside of the data that it has been fed with. For example, it wouldn't know how to come up with a Simpson character if it has not been fed data about The Simpsons. And the difference between prompters and artists is the fact that prompters are not involved in the creative process. Even if some prompter like Shadiversity draws an initial sketch and tells AI to finish it for him, he is only formulating a concept. He does not create the end result. There's no other definition for it. A director can also sketch and ask artists to do a drawing based on this sketch. He is still not the artist because his lines are only used as reference. What he does is surrender creatively. AI is taking in the data and produce something based on the data to do the creative process for him. It's not like AI is drawing over your initial sketch. And even if it does, you still cannot call it your art because even in the real world, two artists working on the same project wouldn't claim it to be made by either one exclusively. So artists, AI, and prompters are three different things. Artists create things based on the reality that they perceive, while AI is automation. Anyone who says that art will be replaced with automation does not really understand why some industries were replaced by automation in the first place. Well, it might be enforced to generate more profit, but the world of art itself will not die or be replaced by it outside of the industry. So let's break it down. First of all, I would like to name a few industries which have largely been replaced with automation: manufacturing and logistics. Manufacturing is a process to create products on a large scale. Logistics involve people's basic needs, such as transportation and housing and supplies. Meanwhile, art is subjective, which means it's not intended to be a large-scale production. And by that, I mean in its truest, most primal definition. Neither can it be considered basic needs. I mean, of course, you can print posters, and printing is a large-scale manufacture, but what I'm talking about is the drawing or painting process. It is not done by the printer because people want to see the artist's technique and vision, not the printer's. The printer's job is to copy the artwork done by the artist, not creating the artwork. So, the characteristics are already different, but let's go even further. Number one, automation is intended to be predictable. A machine makes less error than human hands, therefore it is useful to do repetitive things. It is not intended to be innovative. It is not intended to explore the human mind. Art is not predictable. Art can emerge from errors. Art is not something we want to be repetitive. Number two, automation takes away tasks that almost nobody wants to do. I'm sure there are 2 or 3 people out there who love carrying stones from point A to point B, but a conveyor belt does the same thing faster and cheaper. Art, however, is a hobby. It is something that many people love to do. It is also a form of expression, and automation is not even intended to replace how people express their feelings. Automation cannot be good enough that people can see it and be like, finally AI is good enough. Now I don't have to express my feelings anymore, finally. Or, well, now I don't have to have fun creating, nor engage in my hobby anymore because I can tell AI to have fun on my behalf. That is simply not why artists create. That's not what art is all about. Number three, automation is fixated upon efficiency and profit. Art is fixated upon freedom and exploration. Automation cannot do the exploration for us. As long as an artist achieves what he seeks to create, it can be as time consuming as possible. This is why the gaming industry suffers from so many mishaps. The industrialization of art can be good for art, but when the focus shifts from the artwork itself to profit alone, and art becomes nothing but repetitive goods, the result is live service garbage. Number four, the difference between AI and automation in the past is that automation replaces people with other people, while AI removes the need for people entirely. Machines require engineers and operators, so although they replace crewed workers, they open up opportunities for other people with a different skill set to come in, at least in most cases, right? AI, on the other hand, removes the people from the equation almost entirely. And when it comes to art, the artists matter, as we've established before. The people behind the artworks matter. Why? Because people have a distinct style, story, approach, and perspectives. While AI can conform to anything, which means it has to be rid of the element of individuality. And individuality and personality are what makes art. AI does not have any of those. Therefore, AI does not make art. Number five, the current model of AI relies on predictability. Creativity is not predictable, or it does not have to be. Creativity is more than just copying something and modifying it slightly. It could be that, but it could also be seeing something and doing the exact opposite, or combining two styles to convey a completely different message, or copying a style and using it to convey a very different mood. It could be copying a style, modifying it slightly, and using it as a unique perspective to what the artist experiences in the real world in a completely different era, completely different place than the original artist he's copying from. It is called creativity for a reason, and this is what I've seen a lot of people got wrong about creativity. So now that we've talked about the technicalities, let's talk about the industry. Because AI image generators wouldn't have been made if it weren't for the industry and the profit. Big corporations love a good employee. AI might not have the capacity to consider morality, but the shareholders and CEOs have that capacity, and they abandon it knowingly. It's not like big corporations lay off employees only when they are losing money. No, they cut corners where they can because they are motivated by money, not artistic drive. For example, Microsoft saw an increase of total revenue by 16% in 2024, and its operating income increased by 24%. And yet, they laid off more and more employees. There are countless companies out there who run on unpaid internship and AI, having laid off their actual employees. And this is where many people, including Asmongold, throw up their hands and announce their intellectual surrender. This is the "it is what it is" mentality. These people are not stupid, but they prefer to surrender their mind for the comfort of certainty. The problem here is not ignorance, but whether we choose to commit to keep thinking when thinking becomes inconvenient. And to be honest, I don't think universal basic income is the solution. Why? Well, I think it is prone to more abuse, and especially if we are going to have some sort of social credit system. Not to mention, when someone is doing nothing and getting paid for it, The most radical thing they can do is to complain when a percentage of their salary gets taken away, because it can always be worse, right? While all they have to do is nothing. Universal basic income is a charity, and an entity running on donations cannot complain when donors no longer want to donate. You can say that it is the government's responsibility. But how do you call giving money to other people who do not work nor contribute to your operation? It is called a gift or a charity by definition. The government has a responsibility to take care of its people, yes, but giving money does not equate to being responsible. And when the people are not contributing to the economy, the government would always prefer to treat the corporations much better because they would be the only ones running the economy. Responsibility is not always about giving money to people. It can be through healthcare, providing jobs for them, and building infrastructure and better transportation. Giving out money for free or charity should be the last resort when nothing else can be done. And for now, there are things that can be done if only we can stop surrendering our intellectual capacity. If you're still not convinced, here's why I think this mindset is dangerous. In 1961, Stanley Milgram conducted an experiment at Yale University about obedience. The experiment involves an authority figure instructing a group of people to deliver what they believed to be painful electric shock to other people. These people weren't mentally ill, but 65% of them obeyed despite hearing screams of pain and delivered something they thought could be lethal. These people were not psychopaths, they just suspended their independent moral judgment for a moment. This is what happens when tyranny rules. It is what it is, they say, despite having inner conflicts, as they were told to commit atrocities. In this instance, their belief does not matter because their action determines their legacy. People like Asmongold, for example, I want to say I don't hate Asmongold, but people like him who surrender their intellectual capacity on AI art is complicit in the initiatification of art, including video games, in my opinion. I'm guessing he thinks AI art is better than human art because, like I said, he is not exposed to great art made by human. So I'll show some great artworks by human to prove that AI art is not better necessarily. It's just a reiteration of what humans have already made. You just haven't seen them yet. But now we arrive at the question, what does it mean for artists? Even though it can be tough for artists today, it is not all doom and gloom. We live in a world of automation, but there will always be a market for handmade goods, as history shows us. Actual artists are where innovations will emerge from. Big corporations can reiterate the same formula over and over, but eventually people will get tired of them. People will look for innovation elsewhere, and this is where independent artists will thrive. Automation will become cheap, and handmade things will become more valuable. We've established that artists, AI, and prompters are three separate things. AI will saturate the market, no doubt about that, but there will always be a place for artists. Some people love AI art, and they would love to see AI art all over their video games and social media. That's fine. More power to them. They think AI art is cool because they're not exposed to good artworks made by humans. Or they want to be able to draw, but they just surrender completely. They can't be bothered to hone their skills, for example. They are not exposed to good artworks by human because they're just exposed to weird furry art commissions in their timeline. And that's how they came to conclusion that AI art is better. But there will always be people who seek out great artists who are exposed to great art. want to see something new, some innovation, or some stories. And there are stories behind the paintings, sculptures, video games, and movies, music that come from artists. These stories aren't something AI can ever experience, let alone comprehend. People may value the end products alone, and that's fair. Not everyone has to understand the process or the values that make up an artwork. But what's true is that everyone can see a good artwork for themselves. So let them be the judge and let your art speak for itself. So let's be better artists. And by better, I don't mean we have to paint better than AI necessarily. I mean, we have to refine our style. We have to keep practicing to be true to ourselves so that our identity oozes through our artworks. And when your artworks have a character to them, the average Joe will notice. Let AI be AI because there is no stopping them at this point, but AI cannot stop us from innovating either. Go crazy, push your limits. At the end of the day, AI, with its current model at least, can only follow. Maybe when there's a new AI model, I'll make another video talking about it, but for now, the best thing an artist can do is to focus on themselves. Because I don't think Hidetaka Miyazaki is too preoccupied with AI when he can be too preoccupied with creating the next great games.